So we're gonna now begin the other media that is Lord of the Rings, and those are the TV show and the films. So and we're gonna go through each of the films and like what essentially is the story plots for them. So yeah. So first thing we're gonna start with is the most recent thing that's going on with the Lord of the Rings, and that's the Rings of Power by Amazon Prime, which came out this year. And we'll try not to ruin too much of this one for those who still want to watch this movie. Okay, so Rings of Power is now, I'm just going to say it up front, it's terrible. So, but, and what we're reading is actually from the source. So, yeah, be like, well, why isn't that being said? Well, we're just reading from what the source says. It's in fact not what quite the show does. But anyways, set tens of thousands of years set set thousands of years before the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. The series is based on author J.R.R. Tolkien's History of Middle Earth. It begins during the time of relative peace and covers all the major events of Middle Earth's Second Age. The forging of the Rings of Power, the rise of the Dark Lord Sauron, the fall of the island of the kingdom of Numenor, and the last alliance between elves and men. These events take place over thousands of years in Tolkien's original stories, but are condensed in the series. We had a lot of problems with the show. Certainly, one of the most significant problems of the series when it comes to canon is the issue with Gilgalad's authority. But simply, Gilgalad would not have had the power or ability or right to tell an elf to go to Valinor or give them passage there. Another, I guess, issue is there is no mention of Gladriel's participation in the wars in the Silmarillion or the Unfinished Tales. In the book, she does not believe that her people have the power to stop the Dark Lord Morgoth, and they portray her very differently in this show. There's just a billion issues with that show. Everything from editing to weird, like some of the music doesn't even fit in some scenes. Like what? Some weird cutting. Like they do a scene where they're talking against like a waterfall or something, and then out of the blue they do this like over their head kind of like establishing shot thing, like halfway in the conversation, which would be an establishing shot for like in film and stuff, but they just go and do something different. The dialogue is just terrible. Characters, nobody's likable, so I didn't really care about any of the people in that show.
I don't disagree with you on that one. Wasn't a huge fan. Just
Yeah,
very strange choices for a lot of the things that they did.
yeah. So we're not fans of that. So, and there's plenty of stuff out there that goes through thoroughly why what the problems with the show are. But we got a lot to go over, so we're gonna move on from that. Yeah. So now again, we are gonna go over these films pretty detailed. So as far as what happens in the movies, so just giving a warner. So I guess these are kind of big spoilers for anybody who's never seen these movies. So, but yeah, Nick, we're gonna start with you then.
All right, so we're starting with The Hobbit: The Unexpected Journey, which the film itself was released in 2012. The novel was released in 1937, so quite a long time ago. The story actually begins in the Shire. 50-year-old Bilbo is tricked by the wizard Gandalf the Grey into hosting a dinner for Thorin and his company of dwarves. Gandalf's aim is to recruit Bilbo as the company's burglar to aid them in their quest to enter the Lonely Mountain. Bilbo is unwilling to accept at first, but it changes his mind after the company leaves without him the next day. Bilbo races to join the company, traveling onward. The company is captured by 3 trolls. Bilbo stalls the trolls from eating them until dawn, and Gandalf exposes the trolls to sunlight, turning them into stone. The company locates the trolls' cave and finds treasure, the elven blades. Thorin and Gandalf each take an elf-made blade, Orcus and Glamourding. respectively. Gandalf also finds an elven dagger, which he gives to Bilbo. The wizard Radagast the Brown finds Gandalf and the company and encounters and recounts an encounter at Dol with the Necromancer, a sorcerer who has been corrupting Greenwood with dark magic. Chased by orcs, Gandalf leads the company through the hidden passage to Rivendell. There, Lord Elrond discloses a hidden indication of a secret door on the company's map on the Lonely Mountain, which will be visible on Durin's Day. Gandalf later approaches the White Council, consisting of Elrond, Galadriel, and Saruman the White, and presents the Morgul Blade, a weapon of which the Witch King of Angmar, Radagast obtained from Dol Guldur as a sign of the Necromancer, is linked to the eventual return of Sauron. While Saruman presses the concern to more present matters of the dwarves' requesting that Gandalf put an end to it, Gandalf secretly reveals to Galadriel that he had anticipated this and sent the dwarves off without him.
Mm-hmm.
The company journeys into the Misty Mountains, where they find themselves amid a colossal battle between stone giants. They take refuge in a cave and are captured by goblins, who take them to their leader, the Great Goblin. Bilbo becomes separated from the dwarves and falls into a crevice where he encounters Gollum, who unknowingly drops the golden ring. Pocketing the ring, Bilbo finds himself confronted by Gollum. They play a riddle game, wagering that Bilbo will be shown the way out if he wins, or eaten by Gollum if he loses. Bilbo eventually wins by asking Gollum what he has in his pocket. Noticing his ring is lost, Gollum realizes that Bilbo possesses it and chases him. Bilbo discovers that the ring grants him invisibility, but when he has a chance to kill Gollum, Bilbo spares his life out of pity and escapes while Gollum shouts his hatred towards the Hobbit Baggins. Meanwhile, the Great Goblin reveals to the dwarves that Azog, the orc war chief who killed Thor and lost his forearm to Thorin in the battle at the Dwarven Kingdom of Moria, has placed a bounty on Thorin's head. Gandalf arrives and leads the dwarves in an escape, killing the Great Goblin. Bilbo exits the mountain and rejoins the company, keeping his newly obtained ring a secret. The company is ambushed by Azog and his hunting party, who take refuge in the trees. Thorin charges at Azog, who overpowers him, severely injuring him with his warg. Bilbo saves Thorin from the orcs and challenges Azog, just as the company is rescued by eagles summoned by Gandalf. They escape to the safety of the Carrack, where Gandalf revives Thorin, who renounces his previous disdain for Bilbo after being saved by him. They see the Lonely Mountain in the distance, where the sleeping Smaug is awoken by a thrush knocking a snail against a stone. So some problems with this film, actually. Well, I wouldn't say films or problem, but more differences between the film and the book. Radagast is only briefly mentioned in the books, but he has a much bigger part in the films.
Mm-hmm.
You see him a lot more. It's not a thing. And Thranduil's weird obsession with these jewels was just a thing added by Peter Jackson to kind of cause tension between the elves and the dwarves. So
yeah.
Claudian, moving on to you for the next film.
So we're gonna move to the second film in the Hobbit trilogy. The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, which came out in 2013. And it follows. It picks up where Gandalf and Thorin Oakenshield meet at the Prancing Pony. And Gandalf convinces Thorin to take back Eredor and the Lonely Mountain. 12 months later, Thorin and his company are being pursued by Azgov and his orcs party. They are ushered along by Gandalf to the nearby home of Bjorn, a skin changer who can take the form of a bear. That night, Azgov is summoned to Dol Guldur by the Necromancer, who commands him to marshal his forces to war. Asgard then delegates the hunt for Thorin and to his son Bog. The following day, Bjorn escorts the company to the borders of Mirkwood, where Gandalf discovers Black Speech imprinted on an old ruin. One thing I want to kind of mention about this was there's like people mention there's like this whole like Mordor and the speak of that, but it's just black speech, which is still Elven, and it's just a like a dialect of Elven. I just want to make that point. Anyways, but yeah, black speech that was imprinted on an old ruin. This was this and a prior request by Gladriel urged him to investigate the tombs of the Nazgûl, which was a great scene. He warns the company and to remain on the path and then leaves them. Upon entering the forest, they lose their way and are ensnared by giant spiders. Bilbo then sets about freeing the dwarves with the help of his recently acquired vanishing ring. He subsequently drops the ring and first begins to understand its dark influences after he brutally kills a creature to retrieve it. You got to remember, hobbits were like super like in nature and stuff like that. That would have been something he would have ever thought of doing. Like, so it was a real impactful moment for him. The remaining spiders are fended off by the Wood Elves, led by Tyrion and Legolas. They also capture the dwarves and bring Thorin before their king, Thranduil. Thorin confronts the Elf King about his neglect of the dwarves of Erebor following Smaug's attack 60 years earlier, and is consequently imprisoned with the other dwarves. Bilbo, having avoided capture, arranges an escape using empty wine barrels that are sent downstream. While being pursued by wood elves, they are ambushed by Bog and his orc party, and Keely is wounded by a Morgul shaft. They engage in a running three-way battle down the river, but ultimately the dwarves are able to escape. Both groups of pursuers. Thranduil then seals off his kingdom when an orc captive reveals an evil entity has returned and is amassing an army in the south. But Tauralia decides to leave and assist the dwarves. Legolas goes after her. Meanwhile, Gandalf and Radagast go to investigate the tombs of the Nazgûl, which they find to be empty. The company is smuggled into Erisgoth by the bargeman called Bard. Thorin promises the master and the people of Lake Town to share of the mountain's treasure. It is then revealed that Bard is a descendant of the last ruler of Dale and possesses the last black arrow capable of killing Smaug. Keely is forced to remain behind, tended to by Fili, Oyen, and Bolfer, as the remaining company receive a grand farewell. Meanwhile, Gandalf travels south to the ruins of Dolagur, while Radagast leaves to warn Gladriel of their discovery at the tombs of the Nazgûl. Gandalf finds the ruins infested with orcs and is ambushed by Asgard. The necromancer overpowers and defeats Gandalf and reveals himself as Sauron. Thorin and his remaining company reach the Lonely Mountains, where Bilbo discovers the hidden entrance. He is sent to retrieve the Arkenstone, and while doing so, he accidentally awakens Smaug. While conversing with Bilbo, Smaug reveals his knowledge of both the dwarves, the plot to take the gold, and the return of Sauron. Back in Lake Town, Bard attempts to bring the black arrow to the town launcher, as he fears what may happen when the dwarves enter the mountain. However, he is arrested by the master and his servant, Alfred, in the process, and leaves his son to hide the arrow. Bog and his orc party then infiltrate the town and attack the four dwarves, but are quickly dispatched following the arrival of uh, Tanuel and Legolas. Tanuel then tends to Keely. While Keely is recovering, he openly admires Tanuel's beauty and wonders if she loves him. Legolas leaves in pursuit of Bog. Meanwhile, Gandalf watches helpless as Asgard and an orc army march from Dol Guldur toward the Lonely Mountains. Dulador. Well, back inside the mountain during a long chase, Bilbo and the dwarves rekindle the mountain's forge using Smaug's flames to create and melt a large golden statue, hoping to bury Smaug alive in the molten gold. They do so, but Smaug emerges from the gold, stumbles out of the mountain, and flees off to destroy Lake Town as Bilbo watches in despair. Thranduil in these films again is really where the problem's at. I think is he treats the dwarves very differently in the books, and in this, some reason they really make this whole hatred thing. And this is going both ways. Dwarves don't have this kind of, they do, but don't, like, it's not like how they did it in the movies.
It's not an outright hate.
Yeah. That is for the dwarves, but elves are fine with them. It's something they just did for the movies. And also Legolas Greenleaf, our Legolas, was never in the books at all, not mentioned or anything. So that's a character they just put in there for somebody we all know, you know. All right, moving to you, Nick, the last of this trilogy.
So we're moving on to The Hobbit: The Battle of Five Armies, which was released in 2014. Bilbo and the dwarves watch from the Lonely Mountain as the dragon Smaug sets Lake Town ablaze. Bard breaks out of prison and eventually kills Smaug with the Black Arrow. Smaug's falling body crushes the master of Lake Town and his cronies, who are escaping on a boat with the town's gold. Bard becomes the new leader of Lake Town and guides his people to seek refuge in the ruins of Dale. Thorin, having become possessive of the very vast treasure in the mountain, searches obsessively for the Arkenstone, which Bilbo had previously found but kept hidden. Upon hearing that Lake Town survivors have fled Dale, he orders the entrance of the Lonely Mountain to be sealed off. Meanwhile, Galadriel, Elrond, and Saruman arrive at Dol Guldur and free Gandalf, sending him to safety with Radagast. They battle and defeat the Nazgul and face a formless Sauron himself. Galadriel defeats him in a duel of wills and banishes him and his forces to the east. Azog, marching on Erebor and his vast orc army, sends his son Bolg and Mount Gundabad to summon their second army. Legolas and Tauriel witness the march of Bolg's army, bolstered by orc berserkers and giant bats. Thranduil and elf army arrive at Dale to reclaim a treasure once withheld from them by the dwarven king, Thor. Bard asks Thorin for the share of the gold previously promised to the people of Lake Town by Thorin, but Thorin refuses. Gandalf arrives at Dale to warn Bard and Thranduil of Azog, but Thranduil dismisses him. Bilbo sneaks the Arkenstone out of Erebor and hands it over to Thranduil and Bard so that they can trade it for the promised treasure and prevent a battle. Thorin angrily refuses the proposal, while Bilbo basically just talks shit to him the entire time about how he's a bad friend for letting greed cloud his judgment. Thorin nearly kills Bilbo, but stopped by Gandalf. Thorin, cousin Dane, arrives with his dwarven army and battle of dwarves against elves and men ensues until Azog army arrive and forces Dane, Thranduil, and Bard along with Gandalf and Bilbo immediately band together against the orcs. A second front is opened when the orcs attack Dale, forcing Bard to withdraw his forces and defend the city. Inside Erebor, Thorin suffers traumatic hallucinations before regaining his sanity and leading his company to join the battle. He rides with Dwalin, Fili, and Kili to kill Azog. Meanwhile, Tauriel and Legolas arrive to warn them the dwarves of Bolg's arrival, and Bilbo volunteers to relay the news to Thorin. using his magic ring to move through the combat unseen. Azog and Fili and Bilbo and the other dwarves are forced to watch Bolg overpower Tauriel and then kills Kili, who had come to her aid. Legolas battles Bolg and eventually kills him. The Great Eagles arrive with Radagast and Bjorn, and the orcs are finally defeated in the climax. Thorin engages Azog in a duel and kills him, but is fatally wounded in the process. Bilbo makes peace with the dying Thorin, and while Tauriel mourns Kili. With Thranduil acknowledging their love, Thranduil advises Legolas to seek out a Dunedain ranger in the north who goes by Strider. Thorin is buried with the Arkenstone along with Kili and Fili, and Dane is crowned king. As Thorin's company settles back into Erebor and Dale begins to recover with Bard as their leader, Bilbo bids farewell to the company remaining members and journeys home to the Shire. Gandalf, as the two part ways on the outskirts of the Shire, Gandalf admits his knowledge of Bilbo's ring and warns him of it. Although Bilbo assures him that he had lost the ring, Bilbo returns to Bag End to find his belongings being auctioned off because he was presumed dead. He stops the sale and starts hiding his home, revealing that he still possesses the ring. 60 years later, Bilbo receives a visit from Gandalf on his 111th birthday. So some differences actually. In the battle, Bilbo actually uses the ring far more than he actually does when he's running after Thorin. In the book, Azog has actually been dead for 150 years and is only briefly talked about in passing. So that's also a thing. Claudian, moving on to you for the better of the three.
Yeah, so now we're going to go to the last of our movie reviews, and that's going to be the original trilogy that the greatest trilogy ever, I think, in my opinion. But
I would agree.
Yeah, so The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, 2001, based on the book by J.R.R. Tolkien, which was originally published on July 29th, 1954. Okay, so in the Second Age of Middle-earth, the lords of elves, dwarves, and men are given rings of power. Unbeknownst to them, the Dark Lord Sauron forged the One Ring in Mount Doom, instilling into it a great part of his power to dominate the other rings, so he might conquer Middle-earth. A final alliance of men and elves battle Sauron's forces in Mordor. Isildur of Gondor severs Sauron's finger and the ring with it, thereby vanquishing Sauron and returning him to spirit form. With Sauron's first defeat, the Third Age of Middle-earth begins. The ring's influence corrupts Isildur, who takes it for himself and is later killed by orcs. The ring is lost in a river for 2,500 years until it is found by Gollum, who owns it for over 4.5 centuries. The ring abandons Gollum and is subsequently found by a hobbit by the name of Bilbo Baggins, who is unaware of its history. 60 years later, Bilbo celebrates his 111th birthday in the Shire, reuniting with his old friend, the wizard Gandalf the Grey. Bilbo departs the Shire for one last adventure, and he leaves his inheritance, including the ring, to his nephew, Frodo. Gandalf investigates the ring, discovers its true nature, and learns that Gollum was captured and tortured by Sauron's orcs, revealing two words during the interrogation: Shire and Bag Ends. Gandalf returns and warns Frodo to leave the Shire. As Frodo departs with his friend, gardener Samwise Gamgee, Frodo rides to Isengard to meet with wizard Saruman, but discovers his alliance with Sauron, who has dispatched his 9 undead Nazgûl servants to find Frodo. Frodo and Sam are joined by fellow hobbits, Merry and Pippin, and they evade the Nazgul before arriving in Bree, where they are meant to meet Gandalf. However, Gandalf never arrives. However, having been taken prisoner by Saruman, the hobbits are then aided by a ranger named Strider, who promises to escort them to Rivendell. However, they are ambushed by the Nazgul on Weathertop, and their leader, the Witch King, stabs Frodo with the Mogul's blade. Erwin, an elf and Strider's beloved, locates Strider and rescues Frodo, summoning floodwaters that sweep the Nazgul away. She takes him to Rivendell, where he is healed by the elves. Frodo meets with Gandalf, who escaped Isengard on a great eagle. That night, Strider reunites with Erwin, and they affirm their love for each other, which is something that I loved about these films. They used Elven, and they spoke Elven. Going back to Rings of Power, they didn't do that much, and it was just nonsense. But anyways, sorry.
Oh, just so everyone's also aware, this is essentially his stepsister. Just for those who don't know.
In a way, yes. Yes.
Take me, stepbrother.
Yes. Yes. Actually, never thought of it that way, but yeah, facing the threat of both Sauron and Saruman. I'm never gonna get that out of my head now. Erwin's father, Lord Elrond, decides against keeping the ring in Rivendell. He holds the Council of Elves, men, and dwarves who are attended by Frodo and Gandalf, that decide the ring must be destroyed in the fires of Mount Doom. Frodo volunteers to take the ring, accompanied by Gandalf, Sam, Merry, Pippin, Elf Legolas, and Dwarf Gimli, Boromir of Gondor, and Strider, who is actually Aragorn, Isildur's heir and the rightful king of Gondor. Bilbo, now living in Rivendell, gives Frodo his sword, Sting, and chainmail shirt made of mithril. The Fellowship of the Ring makes the Gap of Rohan, but discovers it is being watched by Saruman's spies. They instead set off over the pass of Calacaris, but Saruman summons a storm that forces him to travel through the mines of Moria. After finding the dwarves of Moria dead, the Fellowship is attacked by orcs and a cave troll. They hold them off, but are confronted by Durin's Bane, a Balrog residing within the mines. While the others escape, Gandalf fends off the Balrog and casts it into the vast chasm. But the Balrog drags Gandalf down into the darkness with him. The devastated Fellowship reach Lothlorien, ruled by the Elf Queen Galadriel, who privately informs Frodo that only he can complete the quest, and that one of his friends in the Fellowship will try to take the ring. Meanwhile, Saruman creates an army of Uruk-hai in Isengard to find and kill the Fellowship. The Fellowship travels by river, the path of Gollin. Frodo wanders off and is confronted by Boromir, who tries to take the ring, as Lady Galadriel had predicted. The Uruk-hai scout then ambush the Fellowship. Their leader, Lutz, mortally wounds Boromir as he fails to stop them from taking Merry and Pippin as prisoner. Aragorn arrives and kills Lortz before confronting Boromir as he dies, promising to help the people of Gondor in the coming conflict. Fearing the ring will corrupt his people, Frodo decides to travel to Mordor alone. but allows Sam to come along, recalling his promise to Gandalf to look after him. As Aragorn, Legolas, um, and Gimli set out to rescue Merry, Pippin, and Frodo and Sam make their way down to the mountain pass of Inumol, traveling on to Mordor. Differences between the book and movie: no appearance nor ever mention of Tom Bombadil, which I think would have been really weird. Aragorn was fostered by Riverdale, right? Riverdale by was fostered in Riverdale by Elrond at the request of his mother. His lineage was kept secret. That really wasn't mentioned
At all.
Oh. And then Nick, moving to you.
So my movie is The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. It was released in 2002. The book was originally published November 11th, 1954. Awakening from a dream of Gandalf fighting the Balrog in Moria, Frodo Baggins finds himself with Samwise Gamgee lost in Emuin Mule near Mordor. They discover that they are being tracked by Gollum, a former bearer of the One Ring. Capturing Gollum, Frodo takes pity on him and allows him to guide them, reminding Sam that they will need Gollum's help to infiltrate Mordor. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli pursue the band of Uruk-hai to save their companions Merry and Pippin. Entering the kingdom of Rohan, the Uruk-hai are ambushed by a group of Rohirrim, allowing Merry and Pippin to escape into Fangorn Forest. Meeting Aragorn's group, the Rohirrim's leader, Eomer, explains that he and his men have been exiled from Rohan's kingdom by Rohan's king, Theoden, who is under the control of Saruman and his servant, Grima Wormtongue. Eomer believes Merry and Pippin were killed during the raid, but leaves the group 2 horses in Fangorn. Aragorn's group encounters Gandalf, who, after his fight with the Balrog, was resurrected as Gandalf the White to help save Middle-earth. Gandalf leads the trio to Rohan's capital, Edoras, where Gandalf frees Theoden from Saruman's control. Aragorn stops Theoden from executing Wormtongue, who flees, learning of Saruman's plans to destroy Rohan with his Uruk-hai army. Theoden evacuates his citizens to the fortress of Hornburg at Helm's Deep. Gandalf departs to find Eomer and his followers, hoping they will fight for their restored king. Aragorn befriends Theoden's niece, Eowyn, who becomes infatuated with him. When the refugees traveling to Helm's Deep are attacked by Saruman's warg-riding orcs, Aragorn falls off a cliff and is presumed dead. He is found by Theoden's horse, Brago, and rides to Helm's Deep, witnessing Saruman's army marching to the fortress. In Rivendell, Eowyn is told by her father, Elrond, that Aragorn will not return. He reminds her that if she remains in Middle-earth, she will outlive Aragorn by thousands of years, and she reluctantly departs for Valinor. Elrond is contacted by Galadriel of Lothlorien, who convinces him that elves should honor their alliance to men, as they dispatch elves to Helm's Deep. In Fangorn, Merry and Pippin meet Treebeard and Ent. Convincing Treebeard that they are allies, they are brought to the Ent Council, where the Ents decide not to take part in the upcoming war. Pippin asks Treebeard to take them to the direction of Isengard, where they witness the deforestation caused by Saruman's war effort. Enraged, Treebeard and the Ents storm Isengard, trapping Saruman in his tower. Aragorn arrives at Helm's Deep, bringing word that Saruman's army is close and Theoden must prepare for battle. Despite being vastly outnumbered, the army of elves from Lothlorien arrives as Saruman's army, and the battle ensues. The Uruk-hai breach the outer wall with explosives, and during the ensuing charge killed the elves' commander, Haldir. The defenders retreat into the keep, and Aragorn convinces Theoden to meet the Uruk-hai in one last charge at dawn. As the defenders are overwhelmed, Gandalf and Eomer arrives with the Rohirrim, turning the tide of battle. The surviving Uruk-hai flee into Fangorn Forest and are killed by the trees. Gandalf warns that Sauron will retaliate. Gollum leads Frodo and Sam through the dead marshes to go to the Black Gates, but recommends they enter Mordor by another route. Frodo and Sam are captured by rangers of Ithilien, led by Faramir, a younger brother of the late Boromir. Frodo helps Faramir catch Gollum to save him from being killed by the Rangers. Learning of the One Ring, Faramir takes his captives to Gondor to bring the ring to his father, Denethor. Passing through the besieged city of Osgiliath, Frodo tries to explain to Faramir that the nature of the ring, and Sam explains to Boromir was driven mad by its power. A Nazgul nearly captures Frodo, who falls under the ring's power, but Sam saves him and reminds him that they are fighting for the good still left in Middle-earth. Impressed by Frodo's resolve, Faramir releases them. Feeling betrayed, Gollum decides to reclaim the ring by leading Frodo to her. Upon arriving to Cirith Ungol, some of the differences are Halidar of Lothlorien showing up at the Battle of Helm's Deep isn't a thing. It was just added for fun, basically, to make it the battle more interesting.
I gave them hope too. For
Yeah,
aspects of it.
Yeah, that was another thing. And the Ents portion was far longer in the book than it was in the film. It was like what, maybe a whole like 10 minutes of the 3-hour movie, if that.
Something like that. Where in the book it was like they had dined for like a week or something like that. It was like crazy.
Yeah, they were there for a very long time. Claudia, want to give us our last movie?
This will finish up our Lord of the Rings, and that is going to be the return of the Return of the King. It starts off with and also the book was published in 1955. The Lord of the Rings, the Return of the King, 2003. Starts off with the Hobbit. Smeagol is fishing with his cousin Beagle, who discovers the One Ring in a river. Smeagol's mind is ensnared by the ring, and he kills his cousin for it. Increasingly corrupted physicality and mentality, he retreats into the Misty Mountains and becomes known as Gollum. Centuries later, during the War of the Ring, Gandalf leads Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and King Theoden of Rohan to Isengard, where they reunite with Merry and Pippin. Gandalf retrieves Saruman's Plantir, and the group returns to Idris to celebrate their victory at Helm's Deep. Pippin looks into the Pantir, seeing Sauron and a burning tree. Gandalf deducts that the enemy plans to attack Gondor's capital, Minas Tirith. He rides there to warn Gondor's steward, Denethor. Pippin, who accompanies him, swears fealty to Denethor, who now dead heir Boromir had saved his life. On Gandalf's instructions, he triggers the lights of the beacons, which call for help from Rohan. Frodo, who carries the ring, and Sam continues their journey towards Mordor, unaware that Gollum, now their guide, plans to betray them and take the ring for himself. The trio witness the Witch King of Angmar, the Lord of the Nine Nazgûl, setting off toward Gondor with his army of orcs. Gollum conspires to frame Sam for eating food supplies and desiring the ring. Influenced by the growing power of the ring, Frodo is taken in by the deception and orders Sam to go home. Gollum then tricks Frodo into venturing into the lair of the great spider Shelob. Frodo nearly escapes and confronts Gollum, who falls down a chasm after a scuffle. Shelob discovers, paralyzes, and binds Frodo, but is wounded and driven away by the returning Sam, who, mourning Frodo's parent death, takes the ring. Sam realizes his mistake when a group of orcs takes Frodo captive, but manages to rescue Frodo as the orcs fight among themselves. Now inside Mordor, the hobbits continue toward Mount Doom, their destination. As King Theoden gathers his army, Elrond tells Aragorn that Arwen is dying, having refused to leave Middle-earth. Elrond gives Aragorn Andriel, reforged from the shards of Elendil, sword Narsil, and urges him to commit to claiming Gondor's throne, to which he is heir. Joined by Legolas and Gimli, Aragorn travels to the Path of the Dead and pledges to release the ghosts there from their curse should they come to Gondor's aid. Meanwhile, Faramir, who was earlier overwhelmed and driven back to Minas Tirith by the Witch King, is gravely wounded in a suicide charge. Believing his son to be dead, Denethor falls into madness. Gandalf marshals the defenders, but the huge orc army breaks into the city. Denethor attempts to burn himself and Faramir on a pile, but Pippin alerts Gandalf and they rescue Faramir. Denethor sets ablaze and in agony jumps to his death, which if you're watching the video, you can see Gondor
almost got set on fire again.
just almost got like toppled by the game there. Denethor literally runs up on the top there and just jumps right off. It's kind of a weird scene, but I don't know, kind of grisly. A lot of these deaths were grisly, but anyways, Theoden arrives and leads his army against the orcs. Despite initial success against the orcs, in the ensuing battle, they are decimated by the Oliphants, riding Horadrim, and the Witch King's mortally wounds Theoden. Wow. However, his niece Elwyn slays the Witch King with Merry's help. Theoden dies in his niece's arms. Aragorn then arrives with his army of the dead, who overcome Sauron's forces and win the battle. Their oath fulfilled, the dead are released from their curse. Aragorn decides to march to Mordor to distract Sauron from Frodo, now extremely weak, and Sam, all of Sauron's remaining forces march to meet Aragorn's diversion, allowing the hobbits to reach Mount Doom. Gollum, who survives his earlier fall, attacks him, but Frodo still manages to enter the mountain. There, he succumbs to the ring's power, putting it on his finger, but Gollum manages to bite off his finger and reclaim it. They struggle together and both fall off the ledge. Frodo clings to it with one hand as remorse and guilt flows his mind in the wake of his succumbing to the ring. When Sam's unwavering faith and belief in his friend convinces him to make one final reach for Sam's hand, saving Frodo's life, Gollum falls and dies. The ring, which fell with him, disintegrates in the lava. Mount Doom erupts as Sauron meets his demise, while Aragorn's army emerges victorious as its enemies fall into the earth around after the ground collapses beneath them. Gandalf rescues the hobbits with the help of the eagles, and the surviving fellowship is happily reunited in Minas Tirith. Aragorn is crowned king of Gondor and marries Arwen. The hobbits return home to the Shire, where Sam marries Rosie Cotton. A few years later, Frodo, who is still traumatized, departs Middle Earth for the Undying Lands with his uncle Bilbo, Gandalf, and the elves. He leaves Sam and the Red Book. He leaves Sam the Red Book of Westmarch, which details their adventures. Sam returns to the Shire, where he embraces Rosie and their children. In the extended cut of The Return of the King, Saruman's death happened at the Tower of Onthranx at the hand of Wormtongue. Conversely, in the book, Saruman was killed by Wormtongue in Bag Ends after the scorching of the Shire. Since the entire scorching of the Shire chapter was excluded from the film, Saruman's death needed to be moved to another location in the film to tie up loose ends. The son of Elrond, Elidon, Elros, join with the 30 of the Dunendai led by Helbreth. They meet up with Aragorn and fought beside him for the remainder of the storyline in the movie that doesn't happen. And then I think we're going to talk about the quickly the two animated ones. The Lord of the Rings, which was in 1978, was an animated film by Ralph Bakshi. And The Hobbit, which was a 1977 film directed by Arthur Rankins Jr. and Julius Bass. And they are what they are. I mean, they're kind of just the retelling of it, just really condensed down. So, yeah. And so that concludes our overview of the Lord of the Rings franchise. So, so I guess I'll start with the opinions. Obviously, my hatred for Rings of Power are clear. The bastardization of basically Tolkien's works and who people were supposed to be and what they are to Middle Earth essentially is what that show culminates to, in my opinion. The Hobbit, I know the Hobbit movies get a lot of like criticism, but I actually really highly enjoy them. Like I'll outright just watch them anytime. I love them. So I 10 out of 10. And then obviously Lord of the Rings, the original trilogy, can I give it like a 15 out of 10? Like it's just superb. So, and the anime movies are shit. So I ain't gonna lie, they're really terrible. So I'd actually still watch the animated movies over the Rings of Power, though. Nick, what's your verdict?
My opinions are pretty much of the same. I actually just recently rewatched all of the Hobbit movies. I absolutely love them.
Mm-hmm.
I can watch them in order, out of order. I don't really care. I
Yeah.
love them. They're fantastic. I absolutely love the actor that plays Bilbo in those. Again, like you said, 10, easy.
Mm-hmm.
The original trilogy is literally what started my love for all of this.
Yeah.
I started reading the books, Silmarillion and all that stuff. Literally because of those, which
Yeah.
most things don't make me want to read, but Resident Evil did, and this did. So again, like, I mean, really, I don't think I can give them a high enough score. 10, since that's what we're going based off of, but
Yeah.
really, I would love to give them way more. They're phenomenal movies. They're very well portrayed. I mean, do they take liberties? Every fucking movie
Yeah.
that you watch takes liberties.
But at least their liberties were in the realm of like, okay, Tolkien.
Yeah. The Rings of Power, I fucking hate it. I would no, just no. It's terrible.
Yeah.
If you're gonna watch it, just know we have warned you.
It's not even a good like fantasy. Like
No.
like say if you were to take out Galadriel and all these characters, Celebrimbor, which we mentioned like in this game. His spirit is in this game. Big spoiler. Well, I guess not spoiler, but he's who forged the rings, most of the rings. And it's like he's just like degraded to an old, weird, pervy dude who just like looks at Elrond's like, "Oh, what you doing staring at me? Oh, I was just looking at you. You just remind me of your father." I'm like, wow, really creepy. Like
Yeah,
I
he
don't
is a very strange dude.
like I'm sure great act. I'm sure they're on their own are decent actors. The issues that it's funny the issues that the like Amazon Studio and like the pro Rings of Power people will argue are not the issues I have a problem with. Actually, it's like the opposite. I didn't have a problem with Cruz's performance. I don't care if there's a black elf or whatever. The only thing I had a problem with is why is his hair just not long. They didn't have fades. It just doesn't make sense. So like even those issues were not even problems. Like the whole like, oh well, you got this problem because there's like a woman dwarf. Like I don't. I thought the actress was great in that. Like she did really well, I guess, for the role. It's not token, but whatever. I mean, until they like bastardize her character, which when you watch it, you'll see what I'm talking about. She's great at the beginning, but prior to like the last episode, it's like she just does like a 180. I'm like,
yeah, she becomes
like
a completely different person.
I'm like, what is this shit? Like, yeah, like that's not the character I liked. I really liked the other character of her. Like, yeah, there's just plenty of issues with it. I understand that like here's like the lender. Here's basically again all of Tolkien's lore, and all they had to work with was literally. We can actually. It's rare that we have a chance to actually get a real representation of the media, like the information. So the script writers had literally, okay, here's all the lore minus the books. This is all they had to work with legally. Like, okay, compared to all these other elements. Like that's all they could work with. They could only work with stuff that was in the appendix, and they couldn't work with anything else. Which is like, why make the move? Why even make the show? Like it was kind of like why even make it? Like it was so dumb. Like, and that's why you get such janky things. They couldn't pull from this book. They can't pull from any of these. They can't pull from the unfinished stories. Like it was just a bad decision. And fortunately, I didn't have to spend $750,000, $700 million, and then they had to pay an additional fee for the rights. Oof. So it became $1 billion for the first season, basically.
Yeah, definitely not getting a return on that investment.
No. So, and this is something that they needed to be successful, from what I understand. And yeah, but the films are great. I recommend, honestly, especially even people who are not fantasy people who don't get it. You got like a loved one that's like not like has your interest. I recommend, honestly, throw on the Lord of the Rings. Like it's one of those films that I think transcends.
It does.
All media, all forms.
It sounds weird, but I don't like fantasy stuff at all.
Yeah, it can be pretty cringy at times. So,
but I absolutely love these films, books, all of it.
So yeah, and does that conclude? That concludes, I think, all your thoughts too.
Yeah, that's all I have to say about this.
That concludes my thoughts. If you guys were staying through the end, we appreciate you. I know it's been a trud. We actually were having some camera issues this whole time too, so it's kind of like why it seemed like we're a little like jerky a little bit, because we're like making sure these cameras weren't failing on us. But again, thank you for sticking through to the end. We appreciate you, and if you feel like liking or sharing, commenting, we also have our Instagram on our episode description. So if you want to check out our Instagram, we don't put a lot out right now. It's just kind of we're kind of working all the time, so it's a little difficult for us. But yeah, join it. We're definitely planning on some stuff, hopefully for next year for some exciting stuff. So
Yeah.
but yeah, all right. I thank you. And this was our Lord of the Rings. So as always, bye.
Thank you. Bye.